Welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Nick Kroger, and today we have a wonderful guest with us, Ayub Fleming, and he's a real estate business professional, author, personal development coach, everything that will come into play with what we're going to talk about today. But welcome, Ayub.
Well, thank you.
We're glad you're here today. We're kind of going to be touching on the economy in the first segment, and specifically Central Florida and the foreclosure status that we've seen over the last couple years. And they have this question here as I'm reading it. It's almost like a loaded question. And if you can answer this, you'd probably be worth a whole lot. What was the cause of the foreclosure crisis?
Well, that's a good question.
Yes, it is.
You have to look at several different factors. One of them being government regulation that created an extraordinary access to credit that wasn't there before. Back in the 1970s, during the Carter administration, we saw the creation of the CRA, which is the Community Reinvestment Act. And under the CRA, what they required, banks that are FDIC insured had to put a certain money back into the community through loans. Prior to that, they saw a practice that the banks were having. It's called redlining. And basically what they do is they take a map and they would look at a lot of the minority and depressed communities, and they draw a red line around it and literally would not make loans in those areas. But what they saw is there was not a much higher rate of foreclosure and people not paying the loans than in other areas. So the banks got in a little trouble with the federal government, and they said, look, this is discriminatory practice. You have to change this. So when the CRA was created, they started requiring the banks to make loans in some of these areas. During the Clinton administration, they expanded the CRA to say if banks wanted to do mergers and different things like that, the federal government looked at whether or not banks were participating in redlining and whether or not they were making these type of loans in low-income communities. That really started the subprime market. So once they started doing that, there were mortgage-backed securities and other ways that investors could invest in this that created a lot more funding or access to credit that people couldn't have had before the subprime market. So it was really access to credit for people who would have never had the opportunity to either buy a home or weren't ready to buy a home.
Right.
It got so bad at one point they had something called no-doc loans, where they didn't require any documentation at all. If you didn't even have to prove that you had a job or income, you didn't have to prove that you had any credit worthiness. If you had any type of documentation at all, you could get a loan to purchase a home. Well,
and that pendulum kind of swung from over here all the way
absolutely
to the extreme. So, you know, I can't imagine anybody in the Central Florida area especially not being touched by the foreclosure crisis. Either you buying a home, selling a home, value of the home you're in type of thing. So we all sit back and we wonder, have we fixed this problem, or are we vulnerable to another, what they call the housing bubble?
Yes, we're still vulnerable for another housing bubble. In 2011, they estimated, RealtyTrack did, that the banks were still holding 70% of all foreclosures were not what we call REOs, or real estate owned properties. They were still held off the books. So that means that there is a glut of housing still out there that have not available for sale to first-time home buyers or investors. So with banks holding this many foreclosures, what will happen is if they release them back onto the market right now, you would see a flood of supply that would outdo demand. And so it would further depress the market. So there is another crisis that could be looming if the banks don't get rid of the backlog of some of the properties and the properties were suddenly flooded onto the market. You could have that type of problem.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Well, how does the housing situation, what hand-in-hand situation does that play with our economy?
Well, that's a good question. One of the first indicators of how well the economy is doing is for new home starts. New homes created a tremendous amount of employment opportunities in the marketplace that the secondary homes don't necessarily create. If you think about a neighborhood being built out, you employ a tremendous amount of people. You have to have realtors, you have to have attorneys, you have to have accountants, mortgage brokers, bankers,
right.
You have to have contractors, subcontractors, everyone to build this home. When that market goes away, you have a lot of people who are now unemployed and are not employable. So the secondary market doesn't really create that. So when you have the type of housing situation you see now, that's one of the reasons that you have high unemployment, is because the new homes are not being built. Thus, those jobs are now not created.
Well, that's amazing. And so the new home building would help boost the economy, of course.
It would, tremendously.
Makes sense. How, as an overall picture, is the housing market right now, let's say, in Central Florida?
Central Florida is stabilizing, which is a good thing. The median price of homes right now is about $142,500 in Central Florida. But what you see is in these homes being bought right now, about 60 to 70% of them are still foreclosures, meaning that the new homes are still not being built like what we're used to seeing. So it's good that these houses are being bought because supply is going down, so the price is starting to stabilize.
Right.
So that's a good thing. The other thing is you have to do is look at the economy. Here in Central Florida with New Mars and some of the other medical city, UCF expanding out in Narcoossee on the east side, that's a good thing. Also, Central Florida is doing very well because of light rail, sun rail that's coming.
Right.
So we have a lot of business opportunities. That keeps unemployment relatively low compared to some of the other places in the nation. Our mayor, Buddy Dyer, just came out with a report where with their new budget in 2013, they're actually going to be able to give raises some of the city employees. The other good thing about that is it's one of the few cities here in Florida, a few major cities, that they actually don't anticipate having a problem paying the public pensions like you're going to see in some of the other major cities.
Right.
That's going to become a problem.
Wow. Well, what can we do to expand the housing market, yet, avoid that crisis again, avoid the bubble? What can we do, or what's the smartest approach to that as a community?
That's another good question. Part of the expansion is going to come once you allow the economy to contract to some. Some of the government programs and stimulus have kind of artificially put a Band-Aid on the market. What you have to do is allow for the market to contract. And what I mean by that is get some of the houses out of gridlock, out of the banks,
right.
Get them back onto the market. It's going to be painful for some people because that's going to allow for the market to be depressed a little bit more. However, that also allows investors to come back in and first-time home buyers to come back in and buy some of these homes up. And that would allow the market to stabilize and then have an opportunity to expand. But the more that we, through our government, create these short-term Band-Aid type situations and don't allow the market to contract, it only prolongs the pain.
Well, and as an average Joe person here listening to you talk, the thing that popped in my head with that example, you can't have a baby without contraction, right?
That's true.
So we've got to allow it to happen.
Yes,
Let
you have
it
to
do
allow
what
some
it's going to
of that.
do. It might be painful,
Yes.
but in the end it will birth, stability.
New growth, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I think that's great. Well, what steps can be taken to either avoid, for the person watching that's, about to go into foreclosure or it's headed that direction, what are some practical steps that they can take to avoid foreclosure or stop the foreclosure in progress?
Well, one of the things that they could do is when they think that they're going to have a problem, they could be underemployed or unemployed, call the bank. Don't wait till you're 3 or 4 months and you have now gone into foreclosure in order to contact the bank. They're willing to work with you for the most part. If you contact them early and say, look, I'm having a problem, I've lost my job or I'm underemployed or just the payments are kind of tough, I've got another situation, medical, whatever the case may be. In some cases, they'll push a payment or two to the back. The second is ask for a loan modification where they may be willing to lower the interest rate, which will over time lower the payment. The third is to contact a mortgage broker, your banker, or a real estate attorney who specializes in foreclosures. And the government has done several different programs that they may qualify. The latest being the HARP 2.0 program that allows for, if you're a Fannie Mae or a Freddie Mac financed home, allows if you're not more than, I think it's one payment behind in the last 12 months, they can refinance the home for, let's say, 5.5% down to 3.5%, again, lowering the payments. So the key is don't wait till you're 3 or 4 months behind. Engage them early, come up with a plan, and install that plan.
So sticking your head in the sand is not the best choice.
Absolutely not. Problems don't go away.
No, they don't. No, they don't. As far as an investor or an individual purchaser, what would you recommend to them? They're thinking of, buying investment properties or buying that first home. Purchase now, wait. What is your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say don't buy on speculation. If you're going to purchase, make sure you have some capital to hold long. instead of just saying, I'm going to buy this house and in 60 days I'm going to flip this house. Back in 2005 and 6, you probably could do that
right.
and make a fairly decent amount of money. You can't do that in this market right now. It is a good time to invest because I think the local economy has stabilized and the housing market has stabilized. So buy and make sure you have the money to hold for at least 6 months and make the repairs you need to make. Make sure you do your homework. Understand, is it near light rail? Is it what we call TOD, near transit-oriented development, which means there may be other government subsidies and things that are involved for development in that area. So once you do that and you look at what the future growth is, make sure you buy in an area that has that stabilization and is an emerging market. If you can do that, you can make money. So you have to be able to buy low, sell high, make sure you have the money to hold long, and you'll do fine in this market.
Well, excellent. I know that we talked about, you said the economy in Florida somewhat stabilizing, and we have unique situations here. But where are we in recovery comparison to like the nation? I mean, the average. Are we doing better? Are we on par with other areas, or?
Well, Central Florida and Florida in general is still rated #1 in foreclosures.
Right. That's what I
so we're not out of the woods yet.
Right.
We still have a long way to go. But Central Florida is unique in that the light rail is about a 61-mile rail project. That's the largest in the nation.
Right.
I think the second longest rail project was only 41 miles. So, and there's 12 stops to this. So we have a very unique opportunity for a lot of homeowners, investors, who can use this opportunity to really start seeing some growth here in the economy and in home prices. That's a good thing.
Right.
A lot of places you've seen up north in Detroit, Chicago, places like that, devastating.
Right.
Because the economy, and they don't have opportunities like this to grow. People still want to live here. They still want to move here. It's a great place to live. So I think Florida is stabilizing and going to do well.
Excellent. We have a unique set of circumstances or opportunities.
We absolutely do.
Presented themselves that
yes.
gives us a little bit of an upper leg, hopefully, to
yes.
see improvement come quicker. Well, Ayub, I want you to stay here with us because we're going to talk a little bit more in the second segment about the economy's impact on baby boomers and seniors and the different demographics. So don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with some more Joy in Our Town right after this short break.